First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. We are live streaming on our social media channels, our apps, and our website. What we're going to be talking about today, though, is the breaking news story that you have probably read about this morning, and that has to do with an Alaska Airlines pilot being charged with 83 counts of attempted murder. So this is in association with a flight that was going from Everett, Washington to San Francisco on Sunday, October 22nd. During that flight, an off-duty pilot by the name of Joseph David Emerson apparently caused a disturbance. He was riding in he was off-duty, so he was riding in the jump seat and attempted to take down the plane, disrupt the operation of the engines, according to Alaska Airlines. He was subdued by the crew, and they made an emergency landing in Portland, where he was taken into custody. There's a lot of details within that, but we wanted to actually speak to an airline security expert about this, about what would happen during this, and try to understand some more context of what goes on. And that's why we're very appreciative to be joined by Professor Jeffrey Price from MSU Denver, a professor in aviation and aerospace, and the owner of Leading Edge Strategies. I want to make sure I got everything in there. And Professor, thank you very much for joining us. So this is, I think, getting a lot of attention from a lot of people because it seems like such a shocking thing to happen in this day and age with airline security, where we think things are a little bit maybe more secure than they are. Can you walk us through what you think, at least from the reports, are of how this actually transpired?
Based on what we know so far, which is really sort of limited information, is that the individual attempted to power down the engines during flight, and the flight crew, the authorized flight crew on board that were operating the aircraft, prevented that from occurring, subdued the individual, apparently pushed him out into the cabin area and locked him out into that area. At that point, they didn't seem that there was any other commotion going on behind there. They did call for intervention and did to land as soon as possible.
Well, and, airline employees riding in the jump seat is certainly a frequent thing that happens with all kinds of airlines. Can you give us just a little bit of a description and describer of where a jump seat is to give that understanding?
Yeah, depending on the aircraft type, the jump seats can be a couple of different locations. They can be directly between the first officer and the captain, the two front seats. They can be sometimes right directly behind one or both, just depending on the aircraft type as to where the jump seat's located. So it's located in the flight deck itself.
Okay, so then this is somebody who would have to be obviously pre-screened, qualified to be in that location. This isn't just a general public thing or a general employee thing. This is somebody who has been certified to be in that area.
Exactly. The jump seating is incredibly common in our industry. It's a way for flight crew to deadhead from one location to another, or to get back home, or to go to a location to begin flying. It's really an extra seat on the aircraft that's available, and airline employees do it all the time. So it's not an unusual occurrence.
What is unusual is what happened, that's for sure. And that's with this pilot, again, off duty, attempting to take down the plane. And again, this is based on the reports that we're seeing here out in the public. So I'm not expecting you to have any other inside information, but can you walk through, just for a general layperson's understanding of how it is somebody would be able to do that, and maybe what it was that he was attempting to do?
As best we know is he reached up and powered the engines down, which basically means grabbed the throttle controls and pulled them back to really kind of keep it very simplistic. The best we can determine right now is that when that occurred, the flight crew intervened with that, which means basically just tried to stop him as best they could. We don't know if there was a huge struggle or not. Some reports are varying at this point. I'm sure more information will come out, but they basically got him away from that location and out into the cabin area where they can secure the door to prevent him from coming back in.
Are there any kind of safety mechanisms, I guess, within flying a plane that even if somebody were to pull back that throttle, that would prevent them from doing that? Any kind of autopilot, or is that something, physically you can do that?
It just depends on the configuration of the aircraft at the time. Yeah, oftentimes you can override an autopilot because you might have to during an emergency situation. And sometimes the aircraft won't let you do certain things until you follow a set of procedures to either turn the autopilot off or some other procedures to, without getting really into details of it. If you try and push the plane over, it might prevent you from doing that. If you try and pull the throttles back in a configuration in flight that could be unsafe, the aircraft might actually prevent you from doing that. And that's going to be different from aircraft to aircraft, just depending on its manufacturer and how they make it.
Generally speaking, for an aircraft, if somebody were to do this, to pull the throttle back, what's one of the worst times, I guess, during the flight of a plane for that to happen?
The worst time really is either going to be takeoff or landing. Those are the most critical phases of flight for any flight operation, and it's the most important time to have available power, especially on takeoff. On landing, you're in a position where you're starting to pull the throttles back anyway, but of course you don't want to pull them back too fast, or else you run out of airspeed rather quickly. So those are our two most critical phases of flight. Not that it wouldn't be dangerous at higher altitudes, because it might cause some other aerodynamic effects that could affect the airplane, even at higher altitudes. But takeoff and landing would be the most critical phases.
So given that it did happen, that this person attempted this, the person who was arrested, and we have their name, but given that this happened, they were subdued somehow. We don't have the exact details on that, but we'll presume it was crew of some way, shape, or form. You mentioned that it sounds like they got him out of the cockpit or out of where the pilots are, and I would assume maybe secured the door behind themselves after that, speculating on that. But what happens at that point? In a security emergency like that, someone attempts to take down a plane. What are the steps that take place for the crew?
Some of the steps that they'll take place is they'll turn what's called the transponder, which is another radio on board the aircraft, to an emergency frequency, and that alerts air traffic control that somebody is what's called squawking a certain emergency code that lets them know we have a problem in flight. And depending on what code that is, we'll provide air traffic control a little bit more information about the nature of that emergency. They'll also immediately come up on the radio to air traffic control, let them know they've got a problem in flight and what that problem is. Air traffic control notifies National Military Command, who can scramble aircraft to come up and escort the flight or intervene with the flight if there's, if the flight's been taken over. The airline will also, the flight crew will also notify their air carrier, their main network operations centers, to let them know that they've got a problem on board. So a lot of gears start moving in motion when there's a problem on board the flight. That's really kind of all the different communications that go forth. At this point, we want to determine, okay, are the authorized pilots on the flight deck? Are they flying the plane? Are they under duress? Are they being told to do something? So we're trying to track that information down to make sure that the aircraft is in a basically a safe, secure configuration, and then they'll divert to usually the closest airport that they can handle that aircraft, that can handle the situation.
Which sounds like it was PDX in this instance, which makes sense on a flight path, from Everett to San Francisco, that this would possibly be that one. Once they attempt to subdue this person, who is, I guess, I'm curious just how that goes about. Is this training from crew? Is this getting people involved? Is there a sky marshal on every flight? I mean, there's just questions on that. And just again, for a general understanding, we may not know the specifics in this, but a general understanding. What are the procedures that happen for that, for keeping this person, for subduing this person?
It really becomes a fight, is what it comes down to, is telling the person first, don't do that. There's always the verbal intervention that can take place. Hey, what are you doing? Get your hands off the controls, sit back down, don't touch the controls or whatever. If the individual wants to continue doing that, then it gets into a wrestling match at that point. Flight crew are required to be trained in real basic levels of self-defense, but that's incredibly basic levels. We're not talking about any sort of advanced self-defense classes or anything like that. Just kind of some basic principles, and that's really kind of up to each airline how they're going to decide how to do that. So it's kind of a wrestling match to get the person out. If somebody's available to call for help from and back, flight attendant might be able to come forward and assist with that. But it's got to have to be somebody that has access to the cockpit, that can get through a locked cockpit door, or that somebody can open for them to allow them to come up there. The air marshals, they're usually going to be back in the cabin area. If there are any on board, the pilots will know that. The pilots of every aircraft know if there's air marshals on board or any other personnel on board that are authorized to carry a firearm, such as a federal agent, or you might have a state and local law enforcement officer escorting a prisoner or something like that. So they'll know if there's anybody on board the flight that's armed that they can call for assistance. And it's really kind of making that up based on the situation. What do we have at our disposal for resources, or who do we have for resources? And number one, let's get this person off the controls. Number two, let's get them off the cockpit or out of the flight deck and secure them so that we can secure this aircraft and get it on the ground.
Is that a situation wherever if some of those things weren't in place where they could call for the help of actual passengers on the flight?
That's always a possibility. We've seen passenger intervention a lot with unruly passengers, especially during COVID, now post-COVID, where passengers have been called in to help or have just voluntarily helped. We really haven't seen that on the flight deck itself. We've seen people try to access the flight deck and passengers try to intervene with that. But this one it's obviously extraordinary and unusual that you would have a jump seating pilot attempt to do this. It's not without precedent, though. This occurred, you can go all the way back to 1994 on a FedEx flight where the jump seating pilot attempted to take control of the flight deck. And at that point, there were 3 people on board the aircraft that were flying it because it was a DC-10, required 3 people. And he entered the cockpit with a spear gun and some hammers and proceeded to attack the crew in an attempt to take over the plane. And he was basically fought off by all 3 of the flight crew members, who all suffered serious critical injuries, were never able to fly again, but they were able to subdue him and get the plane safely on the ground. So although this is incredibly unusual, it's not without precedent.
So the fact that this is so incredibly unusual or extraordinary, do you think that this could lead to further regulation or more ways to try to prevent something like this exact situation happening again?
I think what they'll do is they'll analyze the situation and take a look at where all of the normal procedures that were required to be followed. This was a flight crew member, possibly even a known flight crew member or member of that program, which means that they're subject to higher levels of scrutiny by TSA, but for that benefit, they can often bypass screening checkpoints. In this case, that wouldn't have mattered. It doesn't seem like the person had a weapon or not, so whether they were screened or not really wouldn't have mattered. They still had lawful access to the flight deck. So I think it'll call for a review of those procedures, but also there might be some initial just more suspicious awareness activity. People kind of on a higher level of alert, because once you get a situation like this, you can get copycats. Fortunately, we never really had that after the incident back in '94, but that was also on a cargo plane and didn't make as much of a news hit as this one makes, because post 9/11, everything aviation security is going to be obviously incredibly scrutinized. So we'll see on the procedures. After 9/11, they did stop jump seating for a period of time. Today, you usually have to work for that airline internationally if you want to jump seat, or domestically if you're part of an air carrier agreement. You can jump seat on different aircraft domestically. So imagine they'll look at the procedures and they'll probably just say, this is one of those things where person had lawful access, flight crew did what they were supposed to do, keep an eye on things, and if there's a problem, intervene.
Well, Professor, I want to say thank you very much for joining us to talk about this and give some more context on that. It's really, really valuable to understand it from somebody coming from such an expert stance from you. And for everybody out there too, just want to reiterate, for anybody who wants to follow along with you or speak to you more, find out more about you, what would be the best place for them to go?
Probably LinkedIn. I tend to post a lot there. It's Jeff Price Aviation is the handle on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to follow along, or leadingedgestrategies.com. Pretty much type my name with aviation into Google and you'll hit one of those sites.
All right. Well, Professor, thank you very much. I know you're very busy. Thanks for taking some time with us to discuss this. Really, really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
All right. So really nice to have that insight and input there from Professor Price about what's going on. So for those of you watching, again, we are live here. Depending on when you're watching this segment, this is part of Fox 12 Now. We're live here from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. And just recapping that, so an Alaska Airlines pilot charged with 83 counts of attempted murder based on attempting to bring down that flight, a Horizon Airlines flight from Everett to San Francisco. We've got all the details about that. If you want to follow up on it, kptv.com. We'll be covering the story, of course, throughout the day. If we get more information, we will bring that to you as well, so you can follow along with this. But that's where we're at right now. As the professor said, unprecedented or extraordinary. Not necessarily unprecedented, because he did reference that 1994 flight, a DC-10 flight, where this similar kind of situation happened. But this was, the arrest was off-duty pilot Joseph David Emerson, 44, who was taken into custody. And this was on Sunday, October 22nd, and around 6:30 p.m. when the flight was landed at PDX in Portland, interrupting its flight to San Francisco. So we're probably going to be getting a lot more information about this. We'll find out more details of exactly what happened, how he attempted to bring it down. We understand tried to take the throttle down, and that was at least how he tried to stop the plane, how he tried to take the plane down, how they were able to subdue him. We don't have all the details on that. We do know that he eventually was subdued, taken to the back of the plane, and I'm sure we'll be finding out all that information as the day goes on, and as we find out more. I do know that we also have some recordings from the actual correspondence between the tower and the plane. We'll be getting those out as well, so you can hear what happened there. That's all happening right now in the background. Again, we're bringing you breaking news as we get it, so really appreciate the expert there to give some more context on that. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler, and as always, we will be here for you with breaking news anytime between 1 and 4 p.m. during the day. It's in between our noon news and our 4 p.m. news. This is the place to go. So if there's more breaking news that happens, we'll be right here, right back with you. We also have plenty of other segments that we do throughout the day outside of breaking news, so lots of things to follow along with. You can see all of that and watch all of that and share all of that at our Fox 12 Oregon YouTube channel or our app. If you download the Fox 12 Oregon app, there's a Fox 12 Now button right there. You can hit that and watch all of our segments. But that's what we have for right now. We'll bring you more info as we get it, but we'll sign off. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.